So these are the 4 key points that we need to recognize. God created the man first. He gave the man responsibility to manage and work in the garden. Then He creates a helper for the man, and then He unites the man and the helper. And the man gives the woman a name. He calls her woman. And then later on in Genesis, I think it's 3, we know that Adam gave his wife a name, and her name was Eve, and Eve means the mother of all living. So Adam named the animals, but he also named his wife as well. So, what are the big picture lessons that we get from this? These 4 points. What lessons do we get from this? This is fascinating if you'll stop and think about this. God created marriage within creation week, not after. In other words, remember, He's not finished creating until the end of day 6, and on the 7th day He rests. But in that 6 days, that foundational period of creating the universe, He creates marriage inside of that week. It's not something that was added afterwards. What does this tell us as a foundational, fundamental part of God's design? Is that marriage is as integral and important to creation as the earth, the air, and the stars, as gravity, as light. Marriage is integral to creation. It is not an optional thing. It's not something you can tinker with. You can't go and tinker with light. You can't go and tinker with air. You can't go and tinker with water. Okay? You can't go and tinker with marriage. God made it within that first 6 days, which means it is incredibly foundationally important to life on the earth. That is a substantial point. Now, what kind of lessons can we draw from this about marriage? Let's step back and just take a few lessons from marriage for our culture and our time. What this means for us. It tells us who can define marriage. Who can define marriage? You know, people are trying to redefine marriage. But here's the point I want to make to you. No human being can redefine marriage. You cannot redefine marriage. Just like you can't redefine gravity, you can't redefine light, you can't redefine stars. You cannot redefine marriage. The Creator alone has the right to change, to define marriage, and He has defined it already through His actions. So you cannot, the state cannot change what marriage is. The lawmaker cannot change what marriage is. Only God can do that. It tells us what marriage is. Very important to notice what God did here. And I don't mean to make light of this when I say this, because some people have done this in jest. God did not create, notice what God did. God did not create 2 men or 2 women. God didn't make Adam first, and then make another man, and then make a woman and say, Adam, take your pick. He didn't do that. He could have done that. Just as easily as he did what he did. He could have done that. He didn't make the woman first, and then make a woman and a man and say, pick, what do you like? What's your preference? He didn't do that. He didn't make Adam and Steve, as the pejorative goes. He made Adam and Eve. And there's a lot in that. God never intended for there to be options. Also notice, God did not sanction something called a partnership or any other kind of arrangement. He didn't. We have this thing floating around today. Pastor James hinted on people living together. But one of the things that's floating around today is this equating of partners with married couples. Is it who's your partner? You know, they're partners. There is absolutely no such thing in God's design as partners. It is either you're married or you are not married. You are living righteously under God's design, or you are fornicating and sinning. And by the way, if you are a Christian right now, if you are a Christian, if you claim to be a Christian, according to 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, if you die today and you're living with someone, you will go to hell. The Bible is plain about that. Do not be deceived. Fornicators will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. They will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. If you are living with someone, you need to leave now. Because if you die in that state, you will not be saved. And I'm not going to try and explain to you about once saved, always saved. And I'm not going to get into this theological debate. If you're living with somebody, you're going to hell. So stop it now. And we learn who is not married. If you are not in a formalized, one man, one woman, lifelong relationship, you are not married. I don't care what the state says. I don't care what your marriage certificate says. I don't care what Twitter says. You are not actually married, and I'm not going to treat you like you are married. You are not married.